Well, hello again from here inside St James's Park. Now, I don't know if you can hear the sirens in the background there. Yeah, quite apt, given a lot of Newcastle's passes today certainly came with sirens on. Now, before I do attempt to tackle this video, and hopefully I do it with more energy and aggression and conviction than Newcastle tackled that game today, a little bit of a disclaimer. And the disclaimer is this, that everything I say, and I'm going to pick through the reasons as to why Newcastle was so bad, and which they were, we're not going to hide away from that. But the asterisk to it all is that they've won 9 out of 9 before today. They've been fantastic and they will be fantastic again. They've got a brilliant manager, they've got brilliant players. Don't forget the last time they had a bad defeat like this, down at Brentford. What came on the back of it? The 9 straight wins. So I do think it's important there's not an overreaction, but that doesn't mean we can't pore over the whys and wherefores of what was, for me, probably by far the worst performance of the season, especially as it came on the back of such expectation. Now, chasing a club record 10 out of 10 victories to then serve up a 1 out of 10 performance, where did that come from and why did it come about as well? I wasn't expecting it. Now, a few have said today was the banana skin where they thought Newcastle might slip up. I didn't. I really didn't. I just thought they were in such a good place. They've got fantastic players. Now, I was going to use that phrase, they've got better players than Bournemouth. Well, not on the evidence of today, and you'd certainly take 1 or 2 from Bournemouth, but there was the excuse. I don't use the word excuse. I thought Eddie was tremendously honest afterwards. He didn't shy away from it at all, but he did say that fatigue played a real part there. Well, yes, okay, but I'd looked at that before the game, and Bournemouth had played on Tuesday night down at Chelsea. They had gone with the same 11 themselves again. On Bournemouth's bench, they had 4 or 5 kids basically. On the goalkeeper, they only had 9 outfield appearances among all of their substitutes. So they had the excuse of injuries and fatigue. They had Lewis Hall, a midfielder, at right back. So when I looked at the 2 teams and the basis for my prediction, before anybody comes back and says, why on earth did you say it was going to be 3-0 to Newcastle? I did that considering all of the evidence. I didn't expect that there today. And maybe as much as fatigue, was it not complacency? Was it the fact that Newcastle came into that game and they didn't expect that? They were sleepwalking from the off. Listen, guys, after 5 minutes, I put a tweet out saying Newcastle haven't started well here. They haven't been out of their own half. Well, everything we saw in the first 5 minutes then played out during the course of the next 90. Nothing really changed this tactic of playing out from the back. It's worked well, feeding the ball into midfield to those wide players. They've got the players to deal with it. They couldn't today. I think they should have abandoned that early on and tried something different. It was so evident and so obvious that it wasn't going to work against a side like Bournemouth. And if you are going to have an off day, don't do it against a side who won't just bite you on the backside. They'll bite you everywhere. And that back 4, well, they were tormented and terrorised from the off in their own individual way. And we look over the 4 or 5 performances of those in defence. They had a nightmare. They really did. And that opening 5 minutes and their performance set the tone just for a bad day, and that playing the ball out from the back, it wasn't working against a team with that aggression and that energy and the press that Bournemouth had. And Bournemouth were fantastic. Take nothing away. The 4-1 scoreline, they only got the 2, the 3rd and the 4th goals there at the very end in stoppage time. But I actually thought that gave the game a fairer reflection of the difference between the 2 sides. And as I said, Eddie didn't shy away from that. He's always honest, yes, the fatigue thing. They played fatigued, they played tired. I wouldn't, disagree with that in terms of an assessment. I just don't think it's really an excuse. I don't think they should have been. I wouldn't have changed the team. I thought going in with the same 11 again, yes, it's been 3 games in 6 days, but that 11 didn't play against Bromley last Sunday. They should be able to handle 2 home games. There's been no travel involved. They should have come here today and won him. What was it a case of? So it's much a case for me of just complacency. There was just a real lack of urgency to everything they did, and that was evident from the very off, and nothing changed. Should they have changed the tactic and gone long, avoided what was a very obvious harmful ploy of playing the ball out? Bournemouth were just picking it off. But even then, if they had done something different, when they did get the ball into the final third, into those areas, how bad was that final ball and that final execution? And when it's like that, it serves as twofold, because not only does your own attack break down, it then gives the opposition the chance to break. And Bournemouth did that absolutely fantastically, and weren't they ruthless? They're almost like Newcastle at their best at times during the past few years, playing with that high energy, that high press, that high intensity, taking the ball off the opposition, getting it into the best players, those forward players, and just being absolutely clinical and unforgiving. Justin Kluivert, in 45 minutes, scored twice as many goals as his dad managed in a full season here in the Premier League at St James's Park. He had to wait until the 90th minute for his third, but he was tremendous. And you compare that to what Alexander Isak had today. Well, he had absolutely nothing. I'm not going to blame Isak. He wasn't very good within himself, but I thought what happened behind him, there was just nothing there. The defence had a bad day. The midfield didn't function. The wide players weren't in the game. After 20 minutes, I'd made a note, Anthony Gordon only had 5 touches. So from the off, it was obvious to me this wasn't going to play out the way we'd expected it to. And in the end, Bournemouth were really, really good value for the win. And if you're taking positives for Newcastle, it's that it was so bad that perhaps it does just give them a little bit of a kick up the backside, a little bit of a reminder that in this league, as much as they've had a lot of it all their own way and they've worked hard and they've been brilliant to put themselves in that position during the last 9 matches, you've got to be at it every game. You can't come off it like they did today. Now, you might be screaming at me now, do we really have to do this? But let's go back over the game and see exactly where it did go wrong for Newcastle. And from the off, as I've already said, it was pretty clear to me that this wasn't going to be Newcastle's day and it was very much going to be Bournemouth's. And that was inside 90 seconds when David Brooks sprints away from Lewis Hall there on the right wing, gets in behind that Sandro Tonali who mops up. And Tonali, I thought, was the one player who probably did emerge with a little bit of credit today. But inside the first 5 minutes, he's had to do that twice, again on the opposite flank. And this was a recurring theme, and this really did show you the way the game was going to go. Semenyo gets by Livramento, and again, it's Tonali who gets across and concedes the corner. Before that, there was a Dan Burn pass where he gave it away, and it ends up with Martin Dubravka having to make a good save from Autara. The ball comes back, Semenyo puts it over the bar. This is inside the first 5 minutes, and again, I've got that brilliant vantage in the press box. I'm the closest journalist to the Newcastle dugout, sat just behind that. I'm watching Eddie Howe on the touchline, and he's shaking his head inside 5 minutes. Now, inside 5 minutes, I've got a neck ache, because I'm just looking down towards the Gallagher end. Newcastle physically did not make it outside of their own half inside the first 5 minutes, and it was no surprise to anybody here inside the stadium watching on television when in the 6th minute Bournemouth took the lead. If anything, you're asking what took them. And again, it's the same theme. It's a ball in behind Tino Livramento. Semenyo gets there, he pulls it back. Jacob Murphy is sleeping. Justin Kluivert steps off him, and then he's left all alone in the box, 12 yards out, drills it into the bottom corner. That's 1-0. And you're looking at it and thinking, where's this reaction going to be? Is that the wake-up call? They've been sleepwalking. It's been that slumbersome start. Perhaps it's what they needed. Again, you're just looking, trying to extract those positives. Well, it didn't really happen. The game continued in much the same tone. Tonali again had to arrive on the scene and put out another fire. And it looked for all the world as if Bournemouth were going to go and score a second goal. Those passes out from the back just weren't working. They were coughing up possession. The mood inside the stadium, the guys in the strawberry corner were trying, but there was an agitated feel. There was nothing really happening on the pitch. I think I tweeted at the time, this needs a big challenge or a big moment to stoke everyone on and off the pitch. And it happened. It arrived, and it was a real surprise, really. Now, it was a corner in the 25th minute. Anthony Gordon had just taken one, and it was a delivery that was reflective of pretty much Gordon's and everybody's during the course of the game. It was flat, it was low, it was clear. It went away for another corner, and Gordon actually calls Lewis Hall across and almost says, well, you have a go, it's just not happening for me. Lewis Hall takes the corner, and Bruno Guimaraes provides that moment that we thought might just change everything. It's the header. It's almost Gary Speed-esque as well, to find the little space, a little jump, flashes it into the bottom corner, as Speed did countless times here. And it's a brilliant goal. It's a captain's goal, and you're thinking, right, okay, that is the reprieve they needed. Bournemouth, as we said, had come into the game with pretty much the same 11 players, all those kids on the bench. The intensity with which they started could not last. I didn't think it would last. It's 1-1. Newcastle now are going to go on and show why they've won the last 9, and they're going to take their place third in the Premier League. In the race, there's a good 5 or 10 minute spell. The stadium's up. Joe Linton goes into a challenge. There's a little bit of aggro, and you're thinking, okay, they're going to turn the screw. That was the phrase Eddie used with us afterwards, but it didn't really happen. That 5 minutes, it was pretty fleeting, really. And at no point, these are Eddie's words, that his team have control of the game. And just as it got towards half-time, I drafted something to put out on social media at half-time that Newcastle would be mighty relieved to get there at 1-1. Well, I drafted that too soon. It was 2-1 on the stroke of half-time. And it's Kluivert again, and it's Dan Burn's ball. Now, 5 minutes before this, Dan Burn had played the ball out to Anthony Gordon. It didn't really work. Gordon screamed towards those at the back. He said, no more, just stop doing it. Eddie Howe then had a word with Dan Burn. He spoke to Anthony Gordon. It seemed as if they were going to avoid that tactic, avoid the unnecessary risk. Well, right on the stroke of half-time, Dan Burn plays a ball into Bruno. It's a 5-yard pass. Bruno's got 3 men around him. I said, I used that phrase earlier. It had sirens on it. Bruno might have asked for it. He might have wanted it, but the defender in that position has got to take responsibility and realise that it's not advisable. Don't do it. And it was no surprise at all. Autara mugs Bruno, puts in Kluivert, and Kluivert finishes across Martin Dubravka. That's 2-1. And again, Newcastle were relieved to get there at 1-1. There was still an element of them probably relieved to get to half-time at 2-1. They just couldn't keep the ball. They were repeatedly giving up possession. They didn't have that aggression about them. They weren't winning any second balls. And in every single department, Bournemouth were the better team. Now, they made a change at half-time. At half-time, I set the guys downstairs. They need to get the ball players on. They've got Cher there, they've got Trippier, they've got Louis Miley, players who can keep the ball. If you're going to keep on giving it back to his side as good as Bournemouth were looking, it's only asking for trouble. Now, Cher comes on at half-time and nothing really changes. Trippier comes on a little bit later. Eddie said it himself. I was going to say it as well. The subs didn't impact the game. If anything, the changes probably impacted negatively. Cher played a ball across his own goal within 5 or 10 minutes of being on. Falls straight to Brooks. He has a shot. Martin Dubravka makes the save. There's another chance. And Autara flick where I think it comes off Livramento. Dubravka makes an excellent save. Again, there's then that moment before Bournemouth had a third goal disallowed where it's just calamity at the back and really did capture the essence and the entirety of Newcastle's performance, really. That 30-second passage where they were hacking it clear, it was here, there and everywhere. In the end, it's disallowed. The ball had gone out of play. But that told you what was to come, really. And remarkably, Newcastle got to within the final 5 minutes, still at 2-1, and there was just a little bit of a tiny little bit of a resurgence between sort of 80 and 85. But then they had a free kick right on the edge of the box, which almost just encapsulated the entire afternoon. Again, I've got my eyes on Eddie Howe just down in front of me. Alexander Isak takes it. It's a weak effort, doesn't get any height on it, comes back off the wall, and Anthony Gordon puts it high into the Gallagher end, and Howe's down on his haunches. He just puts his head in his hands and just shakes his head. And I think he knows at that moment the game has really gone. Now, Newcastle didn't have a shot on target in the second half until the 72nd minute. And this was a side who were chasing the game at home to Bournemouth. You would have expected far better. It just wasn't really clicking, wasn't happening at all. Anthony Gordon wasn't in the game. When he did have the ball, nothing came off. Alexander Isak just wasn't in the game at all. Jacob Murphy, his quality involvement wasn't there whatsoever. The midfield didn't function as a 3, even though individually at times they did okay. Like you say, Tonali more defensively. Joe Linton put himself about. Bruno got the goal, but then apart from that, had one of his less good games, shall we say, without being too cruel for a while. In the back four, well, Semenyo up against Tino Livramento, Brooks against Lewis Hall. They just absolutely terrorised. And again, the disclaimer is Lewis Hall has been fantastic. He'll come back, he'll come again. You can take positives from days as bad as this, just serving as that little reminder. And for Lewis Hall, wow, it really was a difficult day. Early in the second half, he lost another one. You were looking at it thinking, Eddie's almost just got to take him out of this. But the same went for Tino Livramento. And as for Botman and Byrne, did it just expose a little bit that lack of athleticism there is at the back there, especially when you're up against young, quick, athletic players such as Autara and Kluivert and Semenyo, as much as Semenyo isn't little, by the way. He's absolutely huge when he walked off there. I couldn't believe the size of him, real physicality about him, and might he just be a player who Newcastle revisit. But it's that third goal at the Leazer's end there that puts the result beyond any doubt. And again, it's another sloppy pass. It's Anthony Gordon plays the ball inside, Autara nicks it, Justin Kluivert gets it and sizes this wonderful shot, uses the defender to bend it into the bottom corner. It's a brilliant hat-trick from Kluivert, and then it's 4, and again I think 4 was just about deserved, if not potentially more. And it's a break. Newcastle at this point, they're all over the place. Willis Sula's come on, they've gone to 4-4-2. They just look terrible and so dishevelled during that final 5 or 6 minutes. It's a ball out wide to Kirkes, who, by the way, you've got Lewis Hall here, who is tremendous. I think he's going to be an England fullback in the future. Kirkes was just a different level almost to everyone on the pitch today. Kluivert got the man the match award, but I was so taken by Kirkes, as I was as well by those players I've already mentioned, Semenyo and Brooks, and Autara as well, who's not even really a centre forward. He's a left winger, but he was the best centre forward on the pitch today. Goes to Kirkes, Trippier backs off. Kirkes puts it in the bottom corner, and Newcastle, having conceded only 3 times during that 9-match winning run, have then gone and shipped 4 in 90 minutes here. And in the end, guys, it probably really should have been more. Now, I've spoken with much enthusiasm and praise for Bournemouth's players today, and that's with obvious reason. But in terms of the merit stars, well, I am going to change the rules this time. I don't think you can award a 3 to anybody on the back of that. So I'll give a 1 and a 2, and I've already sort of hinted at it. Well, the 1, that goes to Joe Linton. And again, I didn't think he had a good game, but you're in the press box there and you're close to the action and the energy of it all. And what I will say is, at least he put himself about. He gave it a go. He tried to unsettle what was a brilliant Bournemouth midfield. And yeah, he tried. And that is perhaps on a day like today when there were very few other contenders worthy of 1 star. And the 2, well, that goes to Sandro Tonali. I actually thought he had a decent game, is what I would extend to. Certainly defensively, even though his team have conceded 4 goals. Without Tonali, I think it would have been a lot more. Not everything came up for him in terms of those balls forward, but did he really have much to hit today? Were Gordon and Murphy showing and wanting it, and Isak as well, as much as they have done previously? Was Bruno there to bounce off? Well, no, he wasn't. I thought at times Tonali was almost a one-man band on his own, and because of that, as the lights go out, I think it's telling me now we've spoken about this game for long enough. The 2 stars for that reason goes to Sandro Tonali. Now, I was at this point going to pick through some of the other performances of Newcastle players, but I think I've already pretty much touched on that. I did the merit scores as well for Mail Sport, and there was 4s, there was 4.5s in there. Sven Botman really struggled in the first half. I think that is understandable. He came off at half-time for tactical reasons when Fabian Schär came on, but it did look a game too far for Botman. Dan Burn, he had that really bad start and never really seemed to recover from it confidence-wise. And I think the best instruction you could have given Dan Burn after 10 minutes was, Dan, stop passing it and just boot it forward. Just put your foot through it, really. That didn't happen, and Burn struggled. The 2 full-backs, as I've said, I said I wasn't going to do this. I've actually started now. The 2 full-backs were just, yeah, from the very off, really. It was obvious they had their hands full and they never got to grips with the wingers. Bruno, an off day, and those front 3, well, yeah, you can say they weren't given really the service to impact, but when they did have the ball, there was no quality there, there was no energy, there wasn't really that intent. I said on Wednesday night, Anthony Gordon dragged Newcastle forward, because against Wolves, if we're honest, it wasn't a dissimilar performance. They were a lot better against Wolves, but they won because they had better players and they existed in those brilliant moments. Well, today, they weren't really at it as well, but it was up against a better team. And when it come to it, the likes of Gordon and Isak didn't have those moments. They didn't make it happen for themselves. Gordon dragged Newcastle forward on Wednesday. He didn't do that here today. It was a real off day from him. But again, I come back to what I said at the very start. It's an isolation. It's 1 game. They've been fantastic. They've gone for so long. They've gone so hard. You can forgive them that. Absolutely no problem at all. It doesn't mean we can't analyse where it went wrong. I wouldn't overreact. I wouldn't panic. I think they'll be absolutely fine. But yeah, guys, to look out on there, the picture's illuminated right now, but that was a pretty dark day for Newcastle. But they've got a little bit of a break now that week. I don't think it'll be the worst thing. This run they've had, it's been so intense, and it's probably not a bad game to bounce back with next week down at Southampton, a game where you would expect them to go and win. Now, if they don't do that, perhaps we'll start looking at, did they need to buy this January? Did they need fresh reinforcement? They're not going to. That's all the noises we're getting back. And if Southampton doesn't go the way we expect it to, perhaps we need to ask those questions again. Why don't you go out and buy someone just to inject something that they need? I don't think necessarily right now they need it. I think they'll be perfectly fine. I think they'll come again. But yeah, to reflect on today, it wasn't very good at all. Tell me what you think below the line. Where did it go wrong? Who played well, if anyone? What changes would you make? I have to say, just to come back to the very start of the game, I wouldn't blame Eddie for his team selection. How can you change it on the back of 9 straight wins? I'm okay with that. Now, with hindsight, of course, I think Sven Botman, perhaps it was that game too far, as I said. But what do you think? Where do they go from here? Would you go out and buy in the January transfer market? Does the team need it? Do they deserve it? Yeah, one last little spin for you guys. What was probably a forgettable day here at St James's Park. But thank you so much for watching. Again, let me know exactly what you think. I'll be back at the end of the week. I'm down to Southampton. I'm flying down there on Saturday morning. If you see me out and about, please do say hello. But before that, I'll be speaking to Eddie Howe on Friday up at the training ground as well. Okay, thank you so much again for watching. See you soon, guys. Bye-bye.